Hello everyone, welcome to another Narc Survivor live video. In this one we're going to be going back to the basics, talking about why the narcissist needs you, because it may leave many people confused. It may make you wonder, what do they even need you for? Like, what is the purpose in all of this? The narcissist is meant to be so wonderful and perfect, as though they can't do anything wrong. And they never take accountability for anything. They just always blame you. They put everything onto you. You're expected to fix everything. You're expected to be everything for them. You're expected to make them feel better. You're to blame for everything that goes wrong. You're the one who's expected to make everything right. Well, as for them, they're just perfect. They're wonderful. They never done anything wrong. They already did the best that they could for you. And that just wasn't good enough for you, or so they say. So let's go right back to the beginning. The narcissist needs you initially because they idealize you. They view you as perfect, as being this ideal target, this ideal victim for them. Someone who's going to save them, rescue them, make them feel better, make their lives better. That's how they viewed you initially. And of course, they would have to view you that way. For that and courage to go out to target you, to pursue you. Because they're not going to go and pursue something that's not significant or important to them. They pursue you because they idealize you. They view you as perfect in that moment, while also viewing themselves as perfect. Because remember, they're bringing their false self to you initially. And in that moment, it's like this perfect union, where they view themselves and you as being perfect in that moment. But then what happens? Why do they then turn against you? If they had all of that effort and determination to pursue you and to be involved with you, then why do they then turn against you? Why do they then devalue you? Why do they then seek to persecute you and expect you to sacrifice yourself for them or for their false self? Why do things always turn out that way? I can tell you that the reason why is because in order for them to pursue you, in order for them to track you down, they viewed you as being up here, as being ideal, as being perfect. And now, although they have this false self, they don't always feel perfect, because it's all dependent on the supply. And One person could never be enough supply for them. It could never be enough to sustain them. So inevitably at some point they begin to feel insecure. It begins to affect their perception of themselves. And then that's when they then turn against you. Then they seek to take you down a notch. Because they've already idealized you, they've put you on a pedestal in order for them to pursue you and seek to have this relationship with you. But now it's like you're towering over them. Because at some point they begin to feel insecure. Or maybe the mask slips. Maybe you start to see who they really are. And then you no longer validate them. So then they view you as being greater than them. And then that's why they then want to pull you down. So initially they need you as a source of supply because they view themselves as perfect when they're pursuing you, but before that, they don't have supply. And maybe the person they were with before, they were devaluing them before they were pursuing you. So really they just put on an act, and it's that anticipation of what they're going to get from you. That's what's driving them. And of course, when they're interacting with you, in an energy exchange from you, that's then validating this false self that they're displaying to you. And they're getting the energy from you and they're mirroring you. And then it creates this perfect union. And at that moment, everything feels perfect for them. But of course, this is only in their minds. This is a fantasy. Because none of us are perfect. And especially the narcissist, I mean, they have an arrested emotional development. They have a fragile ego. No sense of self. And only a false self. So there's really nothing there. And that's why usually they are depressed. They're very miserable people. They're never happy with anything. So then they need you as a supply so that they can idealize you initially, because by idealizing you, they're then idealizing themselves. It's narcissistic supply by proxy. Because if you're ideal, if you're perfect, and they're with you, then that must mean that they're perfect too. So it gives them the narcissistic elation. Now they're no longer depressed, now they're experiencing a high. Now they're feeling much better about themselves, or rather the false self. Because that's what we're doing initially, we're validating the false self. To them, it's never enough. Always just collapse the underdeveloped true self, or whatever's left of them underneath the false self. If there's even anything there, it could just be the void. Maybe they just fall back into the void. And then they feel just worthless again. They feel miserable, they feel depressed. And especially when they're with you. Because remember, they've already put you up on this pedestal. They've already idealized you. So then the only way that they can feel comfortable is by pulling you down, by devaluing and degrading you, criticizing you. And then that's just what it becomes about. Just pulling you down and controlling you. And it also has a lot to do with your self-awareness and your sense of self. Because of course, I mean, they can put you down all they want. They can criticize you as much as they like. But if you're still connected to yourself, if you're still aware of yourself, and you know who you are, you know that you are a good person, you recognize your value, then they can criticize you all they want. It will still continue to affect them. In a negative way. Because the only way that they can feel better is if they change your perception of yourself. Because while they may be delusional, they're not completely delusional. And they're still very much in tune with how you perceive yourself, how you feel about yourself. And that has a direct effect on them. It has a direct effect on how they see themselves and perceive themselves and feel about themselves. And they don't really have a self at all. They can't regulate their own emotions. So they've got to conduct all of this through you. They have to use you as a vessel, as an external regulator, because they have no self. They just have a void. And that's why they target you, to use you to fill this void, to get you to pour into them. And that's what they needed you for initially, when they were idealizing you, just to get you to pour into this void, so that they could experience narcissistic elation, where they get this little high. It gives them a little thrill, a dopamine hit, maybe a rush of adrenaline, which are things that they cannot generate on their own. They cannot regulate their own emotions. They need a vessel. They've got to have someone to use. They've got to have someone to validate the false self. Someone has to see it. But then, of course, I mean, it's just you doing more and more for them. And all you're getting is lies and future faking. So at some point, you stop believing in it. You stop validating the false self. You stop seeing them as this wonderful, perfect person, as being the one, as being your soulmate. And then they experience this narcissistic collapse. It invalidates the false self. It causes them to collapse into the void, which they take as an attack. They see that as an attack on their character, because they're gaslighting themselves. They feel like you're not giving them the proper acknowledgement, attention, and respect that they deserve. And then that's when they begin to use you as a negative source of supply, to where they will attack you emotionally, sometimes physically as well. They'll just do anything to get a reaction out of you, to get you to be on the same wavelength, to get you to agree with them. Because if you react to it, if you experience shame, fear, guilt, then that makes them feel better about themselves, because then they've affected you. And the process in their minds is that if they didn't exist, if this character wasn't real, then how could they affect you? How could they affect you if it wasn't real? Or if they weren't significant, if they weren't important, then how could they affect you? How could they make you feel that way? How could they crush you emotionally if they were not powerful? That's their negative source of supply. And it's what they use when they can no longer get that positive supply. When they can no longer get you to validate their false self, to believe in the illusion. So that then becomes what they need you for. They start using you as this emotional punching bag to feel better about themselves. This is why every time so many victims experience this, it's like by the end of the relationship, you're a completely different person to who you were at the beginning. Because otherwise, it's just not going to work. Because how can they keep you as a source of supply, devalue you and control you, if you still have your self-awareness, if you still have a strong sense of self, if you still know who you are, what you've done, what you've accomplished, how much you've done for them. If you still know all of these things, then how can they get supply from you? They can only get supply from you with you knowing who you are and you knowing your worth. If it's in their fantasy where you're validating their false self. Otherwise, they can no longer get that from you. So then they have to break you down. They have to get you to doubt yourself. They have to get you to become insecure, which they'll do through the devaluation, triangulation, maybe comparing you to other people, getting you to change yourself. You may have done so much for them already, but maybe they'll compare you to someone and say that they did a certain thing for them, and then you have to change yourself, you have to become more like them. So you pull your personality inside out, and by the end of it, you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You don't even know who you are. You don't even recognize the person that you've become. Because that's just the void. When you're dealing with someone who has no self, and they're going through that narcissistic collapse, because they're no longer getting that elation that they were getting from you validating the false self. So then they turn against you, and they try to get you to change everything about yourself. They devalue and degrade you so that you can continue being a source of supply for them. Because although they're changing your perception of yourself, and they're causing you to lack self-awareness, although they're doing that, you're still you. Physically, in your appearance, your looks, you're still you. And your qualities, your abilities, in so many different things, you're still you. So just imagine the feeling they get from molding you and getting you to see yourself differently and having you under their control. When you're still you, you're still that person that they idealized. You're still that person that they pursued, that they targeted. And that's why the devaluation phase typically lasts for a very long time. How it normally goes is maybe the love bombing phase is a couple of weeks, maybe a few days. And then the devaluation phase can go on for months or even years. Because although initially they do prefer positive supply, they do tend to thrive in dysfunctional environments, in chaos and drama. That's more what they like. That's more for the long term for them. And they just love it, you know, getting you to walk on eggshells around them, getting you to do things for them. They just can't get enough of it. Because at that point, they've still got you there. Only now, you no longer recognize your worth. And you lose that awareness of yourself. Because remember, they lack empathy. They don't really care about your personal experience. They want you to be miserable. They want you to be in pain so that they can then feel better about themselves. Initially, they do want you to feel good. They do want you to feel happy, excited, because that's how they feel initially from being involved with you. And of course, they want you to be excited about them, about their false self. They want you to validate it. But inevitably, it's never going to be enough validation, because you're validating something that isn't even real. It's built on a house of cards. It's very unstable. So inevitably, it always falls apart. This is why everyone who sees this video will have experienced the devaluation phase. And no matter what you do for them, it's never enough. It never stabilizes them. They just keep on devaluing you. And then that's how we all end up finding these communities. And then eventually they discard you. Once they're done with you, once they've extracted everything they can from you. And then you may just go no contact, you may try to move on. And then suddenly they start stalking you, they start watching you. Or they may try the reverse Hoover. They may try all of these different tactics to try and get you back. And especially once they've gone off with a new supply, they've already been through the love bombing. Once they start devaluing them, then they re-idealize you. Just like before they got involved with you, they devalued someone else, and then that's when they were idealizing you. So once they get tired of the new supply, and then they start devaluing them, and they start idealizing you again, because they always go back and forth. They always just get bored of everything, they can't sustain anything. So when they come back to you and start idealizing you again, they start to become very delusional again as well. Because they're anticipating you coming back to them. So then they're experiencing narcissistic elation. And they're getting some kind of energy from you. even just because you may notice them, because they will try to make themselves as noticeable as they can to you. They will start liking your posts on social media, maybe stalking you in person, showing about your house, while telling themselves that you want them. And they will make up all kinds of stories in their heads. But one thing that they won't tell themselves is the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is that they're the ones who are coming after you. Just as they were in the beginning. They're the ones who are pursuing you, because they can't deal with rejection. They can't deal with you moving on because of what it says about them. And there's nothing that you can tell them. This is why many of them become obsessed. They become stalkers, because they're just trying to get it back to that idealization phase. They want to go back to how they felt at the beginning. They want things to go back to normal. They just want to come back and act like nothing happened. But unfortunately for them, we do remember what happened. We do remember the things that they did to us. We do remember how they treated us. And yet they still have these grandiose fantasies in their minds. They're still telling themselves all of these things about how they're so wonderful and perfect, and how they can't do anything wrong. But that's just not how we're seeing it. Because we remember all of the things that they did just a few months, weeks, or even days before. But this is when they can become very delusional. And they will just tell themselves whatever they need to in order to keep the false self functioning. And this is when they will really start to home in on your reactions. And it's because they can't deal with rejection. They will start to lock in on your facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. They will start to create alternate interpretations or meanings for your posts on social media or your text messages to them. And they will just distort everything in their mind themselves that it's a sign that you still want them. This is how crazy they become. And yet many of us, we wonder, why are they still stalking us? After they did all of these things to us, they devalued us, they told us we're such horrible people. After everything we did for them. And then they discard us, we go our separate ways, and then they're coming back to us. And if you remain no contact, then they start stalking you. Because they're completely delusional. They will try anything. They will bait you with anything that they can. And there's so many different ways that they could do this. But it could be something where they just show up at your house unannounced. And because it shocks you, they'll distort it and read into it as excitement, as though you really want them. And they will just try all sorts of things. They will just read into anything that they can and try and make it about them. Because remember, everything's always about the narcissist. And maybe you're posted on your social media about moving on, or whatever it may be, and they will distort it in their minds and still make it about them. So really, you're just missing them, because they're so wonderful, they're so attractive, they've got such a hold on you. Even though deep down they may know the truth, that you don't want them, that you can't stand them. Because let's keep it real, who wants to be around a predator? Who wants to be around someone who ruthlessly manipulates and exploits people? Who wants to be harmed? And yet this is what they do. They can't control themselves. They can't regulate their own emotions, so inevitably they will harm you. And I did a video on that as well. This is why the narcissist must hurt you. And deep down they must know this. As a result of their disorder, their mental illness, it just leaves them to be completely undesirable. There's no way that we could want them. And this is why they rely so heavily on their manipulation or the devaluation to trick you into showing signs of interest. And this is really why they need you. Just to make them feel better about themselves. Because normally they're depressed. Normally they do not like themselves. But what they do like is the false self. And that's why they need people to validate it, so they can feel like that false self is them. And when you don't validate it, then they impose a false self onto you. Michelle Neves has talked about this in her videos. When you stop validating them, then they target your self-awareness and they impose a false self onto you. And they do that because then it makes them feel powerful and in control. I mean, it's a form of devaluation, degradation. They're devaluing and degrading you. And at the same time, they may triangulate you. Typically they triangulate in the devaluation phase. They compare you with other people. They're trying to get you to be more like them. And you may be thinking, maybe that's good. I mean, because they may compare you to someone and make it seem like this person is such a great person and that they have all of these wonderful qualities. They do all of these wonderful things for them. So you may see it as though it could help the relationship if you do change yourself and become more like this other person. And sometimes it can be unconsciously because you're coerced, you're indoctrinated. And the more that you do that, the more that you're moving away from yourself and from your true power, from your own self-worth. And you're just bringing yourself more and more under their control, which is exactly what they want. And this isn't just you, they do this every time. They do this to all of their victims. And it all depends on how strong you are, how much you hold on to yourself, to your self-worth. That will determine whether they go down the route of triangulation and comparing you with other people, or if they go more into the indoctrination and the coercion, where they're pretty much forcing you into a certain direction. They're boxing you in. to be the type of person that they want you to be. And something that's not talked about often is that, and many of you may not even be aware of this, because I haven't heard anyone speak of this before. But actually, keep in mind that what they're doing is they're targeting your self-awareness. So it's your awareness of yourself. Nothing about you may have changed. You may still be exactly the same. And I believe that many of you still are. You may have lost a bit of self-worth in the process of dealing with them, and you're no longer as aware of yourself as you are. But other than that, you're mostly the same. It's just you can't see it because they've entrained you, they've indoctrinated you into seeing yourself differently. And that's what they do when they can't break you. If they can't break you, they just try and get you to change your perception of yourself. And here's the crazy thing, because remember, narcissists gaslight themselves. So it may also affect their perception of you. So you and the narcissist may be seeing something very different to what everyone else is seeing. And this is why when you go to other people, you try to explain to them, or you're hoping that they're going to understand that you're different now, and that maybe they will have some empathy and compassion for you. But instead, no, they don't even see it. They don't see anything wrong with you. They don't see that you've changed at all. And then it just feels like you're being gaslighted even more. But what if they're right? What if you haven't changed? And a lot of times I believe that they are right. That you've been gaslit by the narcissist, and that you're actually, you're not so different than before you were involved with a narcissist. It's just that you've lost the self-awareness. You've lost touch with yourself. And you may also be desensitized. You may not feel the way that you once did. But underneath that, you're still the same person. And this is why when we talk about healing, it's not so much about learning new things. Healing is more about unlearning what you've been taught. Because if you unlearn it, underneath that, you're going to find that you're still the same. And this is what narcissists do. They put layers on top of you. That's how they mold you. They don't strip things away. They're just putting things on top of you and making that the new you. And then that's how they control you. But underneath that, the core remains the same. And this is what I've noticed in myself. That once I've gotten away from narcissists, underneath everything that I've learned from being around them, underneath that, my core remains the same. I'm still the same person underneath it all. I still have the same core values, the same beliefs, the same perception of myself. yeah, this is why the narcissist needs you. Initially, they need someone to idealize so they can idealize themselves at the same time and create this perfect union. But then when that no longer works, when you stop falling for their lies and future baking, when you stop buying into it, when you hold on to your reality, then they devalue you, they turn against you. And they chuck all of these layers onto you. They indoctrinate you. They break you down. Because then it can still make them feel like they matter, like they exist. It validates the false self. It makes them feel powerful and in control. It still helps to keep them out of that void. But otherwise they would feel depressed, they would feel miserable. And yes, they may still feel miserable when they're devaluing you. It may definitely look that way as well. But they would feel a lot worse without you to use as this emotional punching bag. Then they'd really be miserable. Then they'd really be depressed. This is just a video to go back to the basics. To be honest, it wasn't as deep as I wanted to go. It's been a long day. I moved from one condo to this one, which is about an hour away. And it was always, I was waiting about an hour and a half just for a taxi to arrive. And it's just been a long day. I always get tired at the end of the day. It just drains the energy out of me every night. I'm sure many of you can relate. I mean, that's just how it is. When you're an empath, everyone wants to be the center of your attention. Everyone wants some of that energy. Unfortunately, it does attract a lot of predators. I always get people randomly approaching me, follow me around. There was girls chasing me, especially at the end of the night, trying to get as close to me as they can. And I guess that's why it's draining though. I guess it's draining because it's not what we want, you know, we're trying to get away from it. And it takes a lot of energy to fight it or to run from it. A lot more energy than it does to just give into it. I mean, of course, when you think about it, fight and flight, these are trauma responses. That's just the resistance of it. But then also, it'd probably be a lot more traumatic to get involved with certain people that you're fighting off of you or that you're running away from. It's kind of like a bear. It's better to have these trauma responses and fight the bear or run away from the bear rather than to just submit to the bear, because then that's really going to get you hurt. So it's all just damage control. But yeah, that's how I feel every night. after all of the things I have to see throughout the day, I just feel traumatized. I'm not looking for sympathy or anything, just, I don't know, I just feel like it's important to share my thoughts, my experiences, just in case you're wondering why I seem a bit off, or why I couldn't go so deep into this one. It's not that I've been busy partying or that I'm too lazy, it's just been a long day and so many people. But despite that, I still do my best to get on here, to give you this information. And for many of you, may have got no contact with a narcissist, you may be alone. I get it, it's very lonely. It's good to have videos to watch, it's good to have someone who gets this. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I get on here as often as I can. Because that's how it feels for me as well. When I watch other YouTubers, I watch their videos on narcissists, it lets me know that I'm not alone. And of course, when I make these videos as well, it lets me know that I'm not alone as well. But yeah, that's why I may seem a bit tired. I may seem a bit out of it in this one. Because there's just so many people chasing me around all day, from morning to evening. Everyone's got to be the center of my world. And it just takes the life out of me. And that's why I try to do my videos earlier on in the day if I can. Because you may notice a contrast where I am more relaxed earlier on in the day, before I've had it all beaten out of me by the world. I mean, as you know, I get chased around a lot. In all the different countries I go to, you may have seen the videos I posted on here of when I was in Vietnam. Those guys chasing after me on bikes. And on my Instagram, there was one in Taiwan. Some guy came over and started just smashing the car. It's just a normal day for me. I go through this every day. And that's why by the end of the day I'm like this, I feel so tired. It's difficult just to even speak. But, you know, I was thinking about it earlier. Even if I was like, even if I was like within like an inch of my death, I've got my phone in my hands. Just like post one last video just before I go. Because this is, you know, this is my purpose. This is what I do. And if anything happened to me, I don't think I would feel at peace with myself, not knowing that I didn't post one more video before I go. These are just the types of things that I think about sometimes. But yeah, let's see what people are saying in the live chat. Rob says, stay strong, Chris. Remember that you can just ignore it. They can't bother you if you don't react. Yeah, you're right. It's important to use the grey rock. Observe to absorb. But when it's over prolonged periods of time, I mean, maybe for an hour or two you can use the grey rock. But then after several hours of persistent harassment, eventually it's like you will suffer like a mental breakdown. And your reactions become involuntary. You can no longer control your reactions, because then you're in a trauma response. You're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So then it's very difficult to use the grey rock at that point. Initially, you can use it, but then over time, I mean, the body, the mind, it's just not designed for such long-term abuse. Unfortunately, I mean, most people, they probably wouldn't go through that extensive amount of time. I mean, you might go through some arguments for a couple of hours, maybe. But for most people, it's not going to be all day, every day. Which is good, because it's very difficult to come back from that. I mean, if you're experiencing harassment for an entire day, every day, just to get from one day to the next, that is a huge achievement. Rob says, do something nice for yourself, Chris. I mean, that's the thing, because when you're around narcissistic people for such a long time, you can do something nice for yourself, but no matter how nice it is, you're not going to enjoy it, because you're around people who are miserable and depressed, people who can't find fulfillment in anything. And once you're around them long enough, it's like you can't find fulfillment in anything anymore. You begin to feel how they feel every day. And that's how I feel now. How I feel now, I imagine, I'm sure it's not that bad, but it's probably similar to how a narcissist would feel. Because I've been around them all day. So now I feel empty. I feel like I'm detached from myself. I feel like I have no self. Seeing myself on the video, it's like I barely even identify with myself. And that's how it is for them. That's how they're capable of doing the things that they do. Because they have no self. And that's why they're always miserable. They can't find fulfillment in anything. Because you've got to find fulfillment in yourself first before you can find fulfillment in anything else. But that's one difference. I mean, if when a narcissist come at you and they break you down, as I said, at our core we remain the same. We still have those core values, those morals, principles. So, despite how it's affected me, I'm not going to go out and hurt anyone. Because at the core, I'm still me. And that's how, even with a great lack of mental power, I'm still able to conduct this video. Because it's almost like second nature to me. It's still running from my core. It's almost running off of my subconscious. But that's another thing as well. The narcissist will try to get into your subconscious. Because while they can control you consciously, there's still a part of you that they can't access. And that's the part of you that they want the most. Essentially, they want your soul. They want the core of you. So that they can really be the master puppeteer then. And they try to get at it through the trauma bond, or from brainwashing you. But it's very difficult for them to do. I'm not sure if it's even possible for them to do that. George says, I watched like 10 videos about narcissists today. That's great, you know, it's good to continue to educate yourself on this. Because these narcissists are everywhere. I've heard multiple psychologists say that 1 in 6 people are narcissists. Dr. Ramani says 1 in 5 in cities. And those are narcissists, not just narcissistic people. Or other disorders as well, other cluster B disorders, borderlines, histrionics. So these people are everywhere. On average, I must spend about I would say at least 5 hours a day watching videos on YouTube. And at least 3 of those hours are watching narcissist videos. I spend a couple of hours in the morning and maybe a few hours in the afternoon, a few hours in the evening, every day. So I'm always learning new things. And we're very lucky to have all of this information which we can access on a computer or a phone. Kaz King says, go somewhere by yourself, into nature maybe. Yeah, as I've been saying from the beginning of my live videos on here, that's what I advise everyone to do. Go out into nature. Go to a forest or by a lake. Maybe there will be somewhere around here I can go. Got my own bit of nature here though. I actually fell asleep with her next to me last night. Which isn't something that happens often. Actually, for the first time ever, she came very close to me and she was laying down right in front of me as I was falling asleep. And I was just looking in her eyes and she was looking at me. And it was just so calming, so relaxing. You know, I've always wondered about things like eye contact, people's perceptions. How do we know that our perceptions, our personal experience is just like everyone else's? How do we know that we're having the same experience? How do you know that when you're looking into someone's eyes, they're seeing you the way that you're seeing them? They're experiencing you the way that you're experiencing them. There's no way to prove it. Because no matter how much you talk to someone or how many questions you ask them, you can never prove that it's the same or that their experience is real. You can only know that your own subjective reality is real. It's like we all just live in our own little worlds. But at least with animals, children, empaths as well, I think that's as close as we can get to having a shared experience. When you're holding someone's hand, when you're looking into their eyes, I mean, that's really as close and meaningful as it gets. Also, when we watch YouTube videos, because it's also determined by how comfortable we feel. I've been doing live videos for so many years, so I feel quite comfortable. And none of you have to see me in person, so it should feel quite comfortable for you. Amani says we're in a test. They just want a reaction from us. Best to transmute into stoic or turn them into a joke. Yeah, I think it helps to be stoic. But when you do it for such a long time, for me at least, I can just feel numb inside. I can end up feeling more and more like them. Because this is just how it is. I mean, when you're around someone who's very happy, cheerful, confident, optimistic, you begin to feel more that way. But then when you're around these empty, lifeless narcissists, it just sucks the life out of you. Because that's just it. I mean, if you're just completely alone, then you're fine. Because at least then you've got your own company. You can just build up yourself. You can just bask in your own energy. But when you're around narcissistic people, they just drain the life out of you. And you've just got no one to reflect you back to you. And then it's like you just need someone. You need a self. Someone who can reflect you back to you. So that you can see yourself in them. Of course, that's when they might return to the love bombing. They may hoover you. And then you get locked into a trauma bond. Or because maybe they just mirrored you for a moment. But this is why it's great to have a pet. Because even a pet can validate you, help you to see yourself, become aware of yourself. Although, as I've spoken about in past videos, the CIA, with prisoners of war, they would punish them with isolation, just cutting them off from people, from talking to anyone, from hearing anyone. And then usually, after about a week, they all go insane. But for me, that's peace. It's very peaceful for me. But once you've been around narcissists and it's affected your sense of self, then it's like you just need someone so that you can become aware of yourself through them. And of course, that's exactly what they want. Because then they're hoping that it's going to leave you chasing after them. So they can just mirror you for a moment. And then you think you're with another self, but actually no. You're with someone who has no self. And we have a self. We just lose the sense of ourself. We lose that self-awareness because there's no one to reflect this back to us. And instead they're reflecting some crazy alternate version of us back to us that really has nothing to do with us. But this also happens with them in a similar way because they need you to validate the false self. But it's different because that's not who they actually are. It's just some grandiose fantasy. and they expect you to view them as perfect and they can't be vulnerable. So it's similar, but then it's also different in many ways as well. Steady Pace says, wish we were all there to make you a cuppa. You need a bit of TLC. We all do by the sound of it. There's actually a Starbucks just downstairs. I don't drink coffee. I haven't had coffee for about 6 years. I just cut out caffeine. Although I do eat chocolate. I drink Coca-Cola sometimes, not too often. And sometimes I enjoy tea. I try to get it decaffeinated. But those are just small quantities of caffeine, of course. Normally just a regular coffee, that's about 80 milligrams of caffeine. I just avoid stimulants as much as I can. Because usually when something stimulates you, then there's also going to be a crash. To sustain that consistent energy, I think it's best to avoid stimulants. But if you enjoy coffee and it helps you, then why not? I mean, I also used to enjoy the taste of coffee. I do miss having it, but I don't like to become reliant on it. The George says, Narcs left a future fake, then ghost you, right after to stick the knife in further. Yeah, they future fake you and they wait for you to believe in it. They scam you. And then they ghost you while you're still believing in something that doesn't exist. I'm just looking through the comments here. Stephen Haywood says, dude, show your audience your eyes so that we are able to see you. That's just it. I mean, sometimes I just don't want people to see me. I mean, you can see me, but I don't want to expose my eyes. Because when I expose my eyes, I just feel even more disconnected from myself. After going through so many things, after dealing with dead, lifeless people all day, I just want to tune out of myself. I want to disconnect from myself and like I'm not even me. I feel like this isn't even who I am. So then by disconnecting from myself, it helps me to escape. And then I just take some medication, I take a tranquilizer, I get some sleep, and then I'm back to myself the next day. Then I feel like the real me. And then earlier on in the day, I can do a live video, even without shades. But this is just how it has to be sometimes. I mean, pretty much every day I always wear shades and I always have my earphones in to just block out the world because it's just so traumatic. But for everyone else, they're just comfortable in it. They're fine with it. But for me, the more that I expose myself to this world, it's just the more traumatized I feel. Because I'm just not comfortable with it. Since I was a child, I always ran away from the world. I wanted nothing to do with it. Because what I saw was just so much pain, trauma, toxicity. Everywhere I went. In my own family, in other people's families, in school with the teachers. Just everywhere. Now, of course, I've seen some people who are different. And that's what gave me hope. That's what kept me holding on. That's what made me so optimistic. And of course, being optimistic, being positive, that's what keeps you stuck with narcissists. That's why we get the worst of it. Because other people, they may have given up long ago. They may have walked out at the first red flag, but we didn't. We stuck in it. But yeah, my main focus is to preserve myself. Because I recognized a very long time ago that people wanted to kill my true self. They wanted to kill who I've got inside of me. And that's why, for a very long time, I've always just worn shades. I've always walked around with earphones in. I've always just avoided people as much as I can. Because I look at everyone else and it's just like, there's nothing inside of them. I've been saying this for a while. Most people do not have a self. They have no identity. There's no one there. And I remember recently I watched a video by psychologist Daniel Meckler. He said it as well. He said, most people are fake. Most people have no self. I always felt that way. I could always tell that I was different. Because I've always known that I do have something inside of me. I do have a self. And most people do not. And that's why it's always that we're trying to connect to people. We're trying to help them, but they can't connect back to us. And we're left feeling invisible. That's why it always turns out that way. that's how it is for many of us. I mean, I've talked about this before. In order for us to preserve ourselves in such a traumatized, fake world, we have to become fake ourselves. We have to have our own false self to deal with these people. And of course, when you have that, it becomes very draining. It just sucks the life out of you. But I've noticed that even while I may have to act fake around other people, my true self is still there. That doesn't go away. And what I mean by a false self for me is just like being nice to people, even though I know they don't deserve it. Just acting like there's nothing wrong with them, acting like they've done nothing wrong, acting like I don't see how broken and damaged they are. That's just how we have to be. That's how we have to be for them. Well, as for most people, they act very fake. They act like there's nothing wrong with them. And many people, deep down, they're abusive. They're miserable. And I can tell they're miserable because just by being around them, I feel miserable as well. But as soon as I get away from them, I feel so much better. I feel so much happier away from most people. And I know many of you can relate. I know many of you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it really helps for me just to get this off my chest. Just to have people who are there, who are listening, and who do not judge or criticize me for what I'm saying, but just accept that this is me. This is how I feel. And I think that's what we need more of in this world. This is why I do what I do. Because most people just need a voice. They need someone to listen to them. They need someone to just accept that this is how this person feels as a result of what they've been through. I mean, of course, this isn't how I naturally feel. This is how I feel having been around a lot of narcissists, toxic people. Normally on my own, when I'm not around a bunch of people who just always need my attention, use me to feel better about themselves, I have tons of energy. I'm usually very happy. And And even now, I mean, it's not that I'm not happy. I'm happy with myself. But I guess I just wish that I could just be me, instead of people always trying to change me, mold me into what they need me to be, as narcissists do. And that's where we just feel trapped, we feel confined. We don't feel free because we're just someone's source of supply. The George says, yeah, so weird. People trying to change me by mentally punishing me for not complying to their manipulation. That's it. That's how it is. It's just like they say, I mean, misery loves company. These people, they get around us to bring us down to their level. Well, as for us, what do? We try to make sense of it. We want to talk about it. We want things to get better. We want to move things in a more positive direction. But unfortunately, first, we have to process our emotions. We have to discuss the truth. There has to be some acceptance of what we've been going through, of what happened. Without acceptance, there is no change. You have to accept the state of how things actually are. Whether you like it or not, whether other people like it or not, that is the first step to change, to healing, to growth. With narcissists, it's the opposite. They don't want to change. They want to keep their disorder functioning. They want to keep getting supply. So there's no acceptance. No acceptance even of their own emotions. They're disconnected from their emotions. And that's why when you start talking about things like this, when you start expressing yourself, how you feel, what you're going through, they do not like you being vulnerable. They don't want you to have any emotions. They will shame you for your emotions because they want it to be all about them. And of course, when you start expressing things, when you start being vulnerable, have that acceptance, that's the first step to change. And that's why they want to push that down. And that's why we all have to gather to these communities online where we can be vulnerable, where we can accept things, where we can express ourselves. Because we all want to grow. We all want to heal. We want things to change. We want things to get better. And we're not just waiting around for someone to make things better for us, despite everything that we may have been through. We're willing to do the work ourselves, and we get shamed for that. We get shamed for being vulnerable, for expressing ourselves, for trying to process what happened. Because they want you to remain stuck, traumatized, being their source of supply so that their disorder can continue to function. I just hate it when people try to shut people down. People should be free to express themselves, to speak the truth. With a narcissist, there's always just this code of silence. They want you to stay quiet, stay silent, don't speak the truth. Don't let people know how you feel, what you're going through. Just pretend like everything's fine. No different to a child abuser. You keep a code of silence, that's exactly what they do with you. They're no different. And there's one body language expert that I watch on YouTube, Chase Hughes. And he said, whenever an adult tells a child to keep a secret, even if it's their parent, they should be very afraid. And it's the same thing with us. When we're told to keep all these secrets, we're made to keep everything hidden. What do you think that's for? Why do we have to pretend like nothing's going on? Just pretend like everything's okay. Who is that benefiting? Of course, it's serving the narcissist. They don't want you to speak out. They want to keep getting supply. They want to keep abusing people. But for me, that's what I encourage. I want everyone to come out. I want everyone to speak the truth. I actually feel very uncomfortable having to walk on eggshells around people, and even having people walk on eggshells around me. I just hate anything other than the truth, other than reality. Stephen Hayward says the truth always wins in the end. That's it, it does. Truth, reality, love always wins in the end. And even now, I mean, they're not winning. By living in a false reality, they're miserable. They can't find fulfillment in anything. Because they're not even connected to themselves, there's no accountability. So how can they enjoy anything? But when you accept your shadow self, and you take accountability for everything in your life, then you really see the beauty of existence, of this world. It all starts from within. It all starts from just expressing yourself, accepting who you are. Accepting who you are without, or rather, not without, but with feeling the guilt, the fear, and the shame, and just doing it anyway. The problem with a narcissist is that they deflect the shame. It all starts with just accepting and processing our emotions first. And then that's how we connect back with them. And then we connect back to the external reality. Something a narcissist can never do. They have to pull you into their world, full of alternate meanings and interpretations. I've done some playlists on that. Many videos on those topics in the past. There's one playlist, the narcissist fake world, and it's the narcissist fantasy world, and then the other playlist is the narcissist alternate realities and fake worlds. Two very good playlists that I've done. Some really good videos. And another one that's quite detailed is the narcissist mode of behaviors. That's another great playlist. Those are some of my most underrated playlists, I would say. Well, I've really gone into detail about it. And those particular playlists, I didn't really do any research on it. This was just direct from my own personal experience. I'm just looking out here at the window. Got a bit of a view up here from the 20th floor. The view's much nicer in the day though, you can really see the mountains in the back. Maybe I'll do a video earlier tomorrow. It's quite late here. But I feel so much better now getting these things off my chest, talking about these things. Because I know that I'm speaking to people who are going through this as well, people who actually care. People who are vulnerable, just as I am. People who can relate. And it lets me know that I'm not alone. And I really hope that you got something out of this as well. I hope that this has benefited you from what I've said here. And talking about why the narcissist needs you. They need you to validate the false self initially, create this perfect union, to put you high up on the pedestal, until eventually the love bombing phase inevitably ends and they begin to feel inferior to you. Then they have to pull you down, they have to devalue you to feel better about themselves, to feel in control. And that's all because they get their own emotions. I mean, of course, for anyone, you spend a day with a narcissist, we can't regulate our own emotions. We're doing everything they can to make them happy, to make them feel good, and it's just never enough. There's never some pivotal moment where they say that they're happy, they feel satisfied, we don't have to do anything more. They just need more and more from you. They start devaluing you, turning against you. And you can give them as much of your empathy, compassion as you like. It's not going to make a difference. It only works that way with people who are being abused, people who are being neglected, invalidated. Those types of people, maybe they just haven't had any empathy again. They've had no compassion. You listen to them, let them share their perspective, and have compassion for them. And then they'll be alright. And then they can listen to you, they can validate you. You can grow together. It does not work that way with narcissists. This is why they need you as a source of supply. And this is why they end up turning against you, devaluing you. So that's it. This is why the narcissist needs you. Hope you found this video helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I read your comments every day. Hit subscribe and click on notifications to be notified when I go live again. Donations are greatly appreciated, no matter how small. You can donate to my PayPal. It's paypal.me/Narc Survivor. If you'd like to book a one-on-one coaching session with me, just go to my website. It's narcsurvivor.co.uk. And check out my Instagram. It's Narc Survivor YouTube. I'm posting new content every day from my trip to Japan last year. Thank you all for joining me on another Narc Survivor live video. I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you soon.